G'day guys, Mike Chin speaking. I'm not sure about you, but have you ever asked yourself the question as a Christian, why am I here and what should I be doing right now? So like I said, I've been a Christian for many years now, and I felt, while I am saved, I'm confident of that, I felt lost at the same time. And maybe you felt that way too. So I'm excited to share with you what I've discovered over the recent months. And I was excited to know that God actually has a plan. So in doing my research, God has a kingdom in heaven, which is unseen. So when he created the world, he wanted to extend his kingdom into the physical or the seen world. So he created the earth. And that's the world we live in. Then we read in the book of Genesis this. And God said, "Let us make man in our own image, after our own likeness. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." So God created the earth, and he also created us, man, for one reason, and that is to have dominion over the earth and all living creatures. So we are to be stewards of his creation and to extend his kingdom. So another word for dominion is to rule. Our job is to rule and reign in this earth. So it just goes on, and as we read in Matthew, it says, you may know this verse, it comes from the Lord's Prayer in Matthew, and it says, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come," or your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So this theme is repeated again, that God's plan is to extend his kingdom here on earth. Did you know that Jesus talked about the kingdom of God more than 70 times in the New Testament, and only once did he talk about being born again, and that's the message of salvation. So we're here in the garden, given dominion over the earth, and we were to rule and reign and steward this earth and to on God's behalf. But there was a problem. And the problem was, as we handed that dominion and rule back over to Satan. Now, you would have thought that everything was lost, but God had a plan to restore us, and he gave us a solution, and that solution was Jesus. And Jesus tells us the plan again of what we need to do. And as I mentioned before, Jesus talked about the kingdom of God more than 70 times in the New Testament. And it was only once that he actually spoke about being born again, and that was to a Jewish Pharisee named Nicodemus. And that was around the question of how he can be saved. And that conversation wasn't actually in public, it was in private. So it was only a one-on-one conversation. But the kingdom of God, he spoke so many times during his time here on earth about what we should be doing. And that's the reinforcement that I want to bring today to this conversation. So as our job as Christians does not end at the cross, like this picture shows. It actually goes across. The cross is just a bridge for us to go back to God's original plan, and that is to extend his kingdom. Our job is to take back our original position and take dominion over the earth that God has created for us. So like I said, our job is to have a dominion again, to rule and reign over God's God's creation, and to establish God's kingdom here on earth. So what does the word kingdom mean? And this definition comes from a fellow called Miles Monroe, Pastor Miles Monroe, from his book Kingdom Principles. And his definition of kingdom is, a kingdom is a sovereign rulership that governs and governing influence of a king over his territory, impacting it with his will, his intention, and his purpose, manifesting a culture and society reflecting the king's nature, values, and morals. A kingdom is the governing impact of a king's will over a territory or domain, his influence over the people, and a government led by a king. So there's a few words I want to point out here. The first one is culture and society, nature, values, and morals. And the second is territory and domain. Now, the nature of a king and a kingdom is to expand. To give you a quick example of that, I'm just going to show you a quick map of the British Empire. And this was taken in a map in 1915. And you can see all the colours in red is where the British Empire extended to, the kingdom was expanded to. And if you just notice that England only represents a small part of the world map. that little dot in the middle of the screen. Yet they extended or expanded their kingdom over all those red parts of the world, like quite a significant part. Now you may know this chappie. His name is Captain James Cook, and on 1770, April 29, he put his first steps in New South Wales at Botany Bay. Now before that date, it was not a British colony, and what type of things did Captain James Cook need to instill or put into the to Australia to make it a British colony, to colonisation? And the first thing that he did was to change the language. He made the national language English. So no longer would they speak Aboriginal, they would speak English. The second thing is culture. So on top of the language, this is the first thing you probably notice, you'll see a lot of traditions seep into the culture. A lot of tea drinking with the little pinky extended, the structure of the family where there's one wife and one husband, the fashion, how people dressed, what they looked like on the outside, what hats they wore, what clothes they wore, gloves, all those type of things. And, it may not even be appropriate for the climate, but because of the culture, they still instilled that fashion etiquette. The other one is food, lots of meat and 3 veg, Yorkshire puddings. Art's another way that you can influence culture. What side of the road you drove on. All those things would have Captain Cook would have brought to Australia to show that this country was colonised. It was owned by another ruling party. And the other one is values like marriage and laws to uphold the values, the legal and the political systems. They will tell you that you're part of the British colony. Now, with all that said, where does that leave us? So hopefully this has given you a rough idea about if you were to know you're in another country, that you would know by all those things that are around you. You'd know by what you see, what you hear, what you feel, and how people behave. Will give it away. So if you're in Australia, you'd know that you're in a British colony. Now, as Christians, we are tasked to establish God's kingdom, or establish colonies of God's kingdom here on earth. I like Miles Munro. He uses the word we need to occupy or take possession of the land. So with that, how do we do that? We do that through the language you use, the culture that we adopt, and the values we live by. For me, this new information has changed my focus away from the gospel of salvation to the gospel of the kingdom of God. So I'm no longer waiting to be called up into heaven. My new purpose is to bring heaven to earth. This is by no means replaces the gospel of salvation, but rather strengthens or increases the need for me to talk to more people about the kingdom of God. And that should be an integral part of our expansion plan as Christians. So our job, is to extend God's territory here on earth, starting with the territories we currently have, which is the territory of our families, our church, our work, our circle of friends and our communities that we belong to. So, like I said, for me, I'm no longer waiting around to be called home to be with God. I have a job to do, and I have a job to do right now. And so do you. Our job is to take dominion and to possess the land, to extend God's kingdom, to influence culture, influence society, so that if anyone were to visit my territory or your territory, they would know the King's nature, they would know the King's values, they would know the King's morals to the glory of God. So my hope is this message has challenged you to rethink your purpose here on earth, to give you a new focus to aim at. As a band of brothers, my hope is that men, just like you, will accept this mission that God has given every believer. As you reflect on how you will become the best version of yourself for God's glory, use your compass now and focus and understand that no matter what area you are focusing on, it is for the establishment of God's kingdom here on earth. Many blessings.